I never thought my own sister would slap me in front of an entire airport, right before the flight that was supposed to bring us closer. After years of minimal contact and small talk texts, my sister Mira and I planned a family trip to Hawaii, intending to fulfill one of our father's final wishes, that we travel together, just once more, after his passing. It wasn't just a vacation, but something closer to a reluctant truce. We both inherited different parts of his estate and memories, but as with most divided families, grief didn't sort itself cleanly. The idea of the trip came from Mira. At first, I appreciated it. It felt like a peace offering. She booked the tickets, arranged hotel reservations, and suggested we use this time to sort things out. Her actual words. But not hostile. He agreed, not out of comfort, but obligation and curiosity. Things had been distant between us since the memorial. Conversations at the Labier's office had been brief, and coordination over banking access, assets, and paperwork had felt a bit too smooth, almost too handled. Still, I let it go. He figured now wasn't the time to raise issues. At least, not before we had actually flown out. The week before the trip, we exchanged a few polite messages about what's next to bring, whether to rent a car in Honolulu, and the time of check-in. I noticed she avoided discussing anything related to that's accounts or the trust, topics she usually tried to control in the past. Something about her tone made me feel like she was too prepared, and I wasn't. The idea of seeing Mira in a neutral environment, sand, island air, distant hotels, gave me hope that the power dynamics would shift or at least soften. But that changed a few days before the trip, when I learned something that made me question the entire foundation of her invitation. We had dinner at our uncle's house 2 nights before the flight, a casual gathering that seemed harmless enough. It was the usual small family send-off, nothing extravagant. Just a low-lit table near the patio, some grilled food, and familiar jokes about airlines and tourist traps. Mira seemed distant, scrolling her phone, tapping the table rhythmically. My aunt, always observant, leaned over during dessert and said softly, "You know she already got an advance, right?" He blinked. "Advance?" he asked. She waved her fork, pointing vaguely toward Mira. "Months ago from the trust." "Used to ask the lawyer." It was said as casually as a grocery list, but it hit hard. I smiled and nodded, keeping my expression neutral, and said nothing. My mind, however, began running. We hadn't finalized the trust distribution yet. How could Mira have accessed anything early, and why wasn't I told? Surely, something like that would have required both our sign-offs or notice? He remembered how firm the lawyer had been about keeping everything by the book. He decided then not to confront her directly, at least not yet. He didn't want to stand on accusation without verification. He returned home and pulled my file drawer open for the first time in months. He logged into the shared cloud link set up for estate documents. Nothing looked changed, but that meant little unless I dug deeper. I started screen capturing timestamps, file entries, and the dates of any uploaded financial statements. He documented everything quietly. No messages yet. No emotion bursts. Used silent investigation. Mira hadn't said anything all evening, even during the drive home. She seemed too calm. I'd learned from our father, when someone is overly calm, something bigger is happening underneath. I didn't trust it, but I didn't show it. Not yet. The next day, I started gathering my things for the trip. Boarding passes weren't sent, but she told me she handled the flights. Still, the lack of confirmation emails raised suspicion. He messaged her twice, "Can you resend the flight info?" And got a thumbs-up emoji, followed by nothing. We's here, that signaled avoidance more than acknowledgement. I began packing but noticed that some of that's belongings I had stored in a labeled box were missing, small things, an old pocket notebook, a folder labeled legal notes and a handwritten address list in his handwriting. These weren't high in value, financially, but they mattered. Mira had helped me store things last month, so it was possible she'd moved or borrowed them, but she hadn't asked. He checked my photo log of the box contents, thankfully something I kept during estate sorting, and sure enough, those items were in the photos from 6 weeks ago, but missing now. He took new photos, marked the differences, and backed it all up to a new folder. Still, I didn't bring it up. Not yet. He needed clarity, not conflict. She finally messaged me with a boarding pass, but it had her name only. Our seats weren't together. Confused, I replied, "Aren't we flying together?" She wrote, "Too much togetherness isn't good. Separate time is healthy." It felt flippant, but I didn't argue. I screenshotted the message and moved on. He guessed we'd meet at the gate or at the hotel upon arrival. He had no intention to fight at an airport or during the trip. My objective now was simple: stay aware, don't react emotionally, and let her lead into mistakes if she was hiding something. And above all, stay composed when she didn't. Protection over provocation. Always. He arrived at the airport an hour earlier than scheduled. He always do. It's a habit formed from years of watching our father plan, prep, and organize everything like clockwork. Meera, on the other hand, was habitually late and proudly unpredictable. This time, she walked in 20 minutes early and refused to make eye contact. She moved straight to check-in. When I tried to speak, she lifted a single finger without turning and said, "Let's get through security first." He followed. Attention settled over everything. She barely responded to friendly greetings from people around her, and I quietly thanked the staff when she didn't. At the kiosk, I saw her ticket routing, business class, and realized we didn't just on separate tickets, but separate experiences. He didn't say anything aloud. He simply noted it, seat 3C. When my own boarding pass came up, I saw economy, seat 27B. Interesting. No big deal, but telling. I asked why she didn't let me know beforehand. She muttered, "Surprise." Was that sarcasm or guilt? Hard to say. She walked off to grab coffee, and I found a quiet corner near a charging station to review the cloud files again. He noticed a new document had been added, by her, 3 days ago encrypted. No notifying email had come. I copied the name, date, and size, and added it to my log. He resisted the urge to press. No accusations, not without evidence, no matter how right I felt. Meera returned, scrolling her phone. He asked, "Did the lawyer send you updates?" She looked at me sharply, eyes narrowed. "Why would you ask that?" He replied calmly, "Just wondering. So many notifications seem off." She shook her head, sipped her drink, and wandered away again. Something was definitely off. But I wasn't going to give her a reason to hide deeper. Not yet. Just as I was zipping up my carry-on, I noticed an envelope wedged between the lining and the handle. It was unmarked except for one word written in my father's handwriting, "Private." No postage, no dates. It hadn't been there the last time I packed this bag. It was my office carry-on, untouched for months until now. He gave it a gentle shake. It sounded like paper, possibly one of Dad's letters or handwritten briefs. He wanted to read it immediately but stopped myself. Not here. Not in a terminal full of strangers and charging phones and boarding calls buzzing above. He slid the envelope into my document folder and zipped it closed. My heart was beating faster now. That handwriting. That centered pen stroke. It was unmistakably Dad's. And if this was placed here recently, only one person beside me had access to this bag, Meera. She'd helped me store this luggage set when we packed up his home together. Something told me this letter wasn't meant for her eyes. Whether she'd read it or not, I couldn't tell. But the fact that it showed up without warning, just hours before the flight, felt timed. She returned from the cafe holding 2 drinks. Surprisingly, she handed one to me. "I thought you liked oat milk," she said, avoiding my eyes as always when she was making odd gestures. He thanked her casually and took it but didn't drink it. He wasn't being paranoid, I was being realistic. I had too many half-truths dangling on the edges. Now wasn't the time for chemistry nostalgia. It was time for precision. I texted myself a reminder, check envelope, 11 de diciembre de 25:10:47 de la mañana, get before. Then I placed my phone face down on my knee and practiced the one thing I had left to hold, stillness under pressure. The morning of the flight felt great despite the Hawaiian destination. He had only slept 4 hours. Meera hadn't responded to my last evening message asking if she still planned on meeting at the same gate or boarding separately. Her silence wasn't unusual anymore, but it still irritated the part of me that needed closure. On the way to the airport, the shared ride was silent. We checked in without conversation. Her posture said, "Don't start anything," and truthfully, I wasn't about to. He was on a mission to stay alert, not reactive. She kept staring at her phone, but never typing. Used scrolling slowly, eyes glazed. I studied her movements like a chess player studies an opponent, watching her flinch when notifications appeared, noting when she glanced toward the left, not the right, after each buzz. He kept my phone in airplane mode, pretending to conserve battery. Really, I needed a break from the swirl of guesses, doubts, and misaligned emotions. He didn't want this trip to be a metaphor for our entire unresolved past. But it was morphing into one with every passive-aggressive breath. She sat 3 rows away at the gate and kept her headphones in, nodding her head to music she didn't they usually listen to. Jazz. He noticed. He filed it away. Something about her was performative today, more rehearsed than real. Anticipating confrontation. I reminded myself again, don't start it. Let someone else show the cracks. He reviewed my envelope again in my mind. Whatever was inside would change the dynamic, I could feel it. But I would not read it yet. She stood suddenly and came closer. Still have your passport? She asked. He smiled calmly. Always. She nodded and walked off again, leaving a question louder than the one she asked. He waited. She was getting close to her moment. He just didn't know what shape it would take. It happened just before the first boarding announcement. Mira stood up abruptly from where she'd been sitting near the wall, pocketed her phone, and walked straight toward me. He stood too, not anticipating trouble, just expecting maybe a tense comment about boarding groups or overhead space. But instead, she looked around quickly, like checking for earshot or witnesses, and leaning. Did you go behind my back to the lawyer? She asked, voice low but sharp. He blinked. What? Don't play dumb, she snapped. I know you've been asking questions. Do you think I'm stealing? My jaw tightened, but I breathed before speaking. I asked for clarity. That's not the same as accusation. Her nostrils flared. You never trusted me, even before he died. He nodded once. And Jube never told me everything. Ever. Silence. 3 seconds. That pause was her tell. And then. It came without warning. Her open hand landed squarely across my left cheek. Not a playful slap. Not emotional impulse. A clear, conscious strike. A few passengers turned their heads instantly. One teenage girl actually gasped. Phones tilted in our direction, unsure whether to record. A gate agent looked up. He stood still. My cheek tingled. Mira's eyes widened like she hadn't expected it to echo that loudly. But I said nothing. Just took one step back, adjusted my strap, and looked at the agent. Is everything all right here? They asked. He nodded, calmly. Just a disagreement. Nothing to escalate. Mira stood frozen until she turned suddenly and walked toward the restroom hallway, fast little steps, all energy drained. He sat down. My entire face burned, not from the hit, but the shame of public embarrassment. Still, I didn't retaliate. No words. No raised voice. He took out my phone, time-stamped a quick note, and began drafting a message to the estate lawyer. Calm wins. Security didn't detain either of us. A witness reported the slap, but when the airline asked if I wanted to file a report, I declined. We're reporting together. I'm not escalating it. They seemed surprised, but respected it. One staff member handed me a water bottle discreetly, saying softly, keep the peace, if you can. He appreciated that. He got on the plane first. Mira boarded almost 10 minutes later. No eye contact. No words. She took her seat in business class and looked out the window like nothing had occurred. He found my way to 27B and kept my head down, headphones in, but no music playing. Used zone silence. Every few minutes, I felt someone watching me. Across the aisle, a woman, maybe in her 50s, gave me a tiny nod. It was the kind of gesture people reserve for those who held back when they could have let go violently. He nodded back. Once we took off, I reviewed everything I had on my tablet, timelines, message logs, trust documents, and photos of missing items. I labeled, backed up, ordered by relevance. My folder was called Fair Split. That's all I wanted. Not revenge, not some grand confession. Used fairness. Truce. A clean cut from all deceit. He opened the email to our estate lawyer and began writing an objective note. No confrontation. No threats. But I have reasonable belief funds were accessed before the formal distribution. Please advise on verification procedure. He attached 2 documents and encrypted the message. Then I locked the tablet. The feeling of composure was new to me. Before I may argued instantly, fought back, or burst into tears. But now, I knew better. No one wins by exploding in public, especially against family that knows how to manipulate perception. Credibility is earned quietly. And I was earning mine. 5 hours in the air gave us both something we clearly needed, silence. By the time we landed in Honolulu, I had read that letter, or at least the first half. Ide waited until we were safely in the air, seatbelt sign off, surroundings calm. He quietly unfolded the 3 pages inside the envelope. His handwriting brought back memories I wasn't prepared to feel mid-flight. But the content was what mattered. No poetry, no emotional drama. Used direct words. He referenced a contingency trust they never heard mentioned, one created years before that divided certain legacy deeds based on moral merit and transparency. He wrote, "If you are reading this, Mira has likely acted first. That doesn't make her greedy, necessarily. But you must now act smart. Don't fight to hurt. Fight to balance." He closed the letter. He didn't look back in her direction. Didn't lean on emotions that could spiral into resentment. He simply copied those words into a note file on my phone and titled it Balance Mission. As we landed, passengers applauded softly, at usual ritual on island-bound flights. It was almost ironic, cheers for arrival, when I felt like Ide just entered round 1. At baggage claim, Mira approached me with fake casualness. "Want to split an Uber?" He shook my head gently. "Already booked a shuttle." She didn't question me further. We rode separately in silence, me with tourists and couples and surfboards, her likely in a solo ride, planning whatever came next. He watched the palms blur by, wondering how many more truths Dad had hidden in his legal trails, how much of his trust was stored not in money, but in warnings. These wasn't really about inheritance anymore. It was about making the right moves, carefully, and never handing my composure over again. She had her chance. Now it was my turn to lead, quietly. The sound of ocean wind did something to my head, cleared it, softened it, and made the situation look smaller. Not insignificant, but manageable. At the hotel, I checked into a different room than Mira. Honestly, I considered booking an entirely separate resort, but I didn't want to behave impulsively or draw attention to conflict. We were still technically on a family trip, even if the definition no longer made sense. On the second day, while she went on a sunrise snorkeling tour alone, I used the hotel business lounge to arrange a secure call with the lawyer. He kept it brief. He explained what I was seeing: early access to trust funds, encrypted documents uploaded by her, a hand-delivered letter from our father left in my bag. He didn't place blame. He laid out facts. A listened, expression unreadable. Then calmly said, "Thank you." He advised letting us handle the financial tracing discreetly. Don't raise questions directly with her. That matched my instincts. Mira couldn't be confronted into honesty. If she was forced into defense, she'd twist perception first, a skill she had refined since college. The rest of the day, I walked alone. I bought street food, stood on the edge of the beach, grateful and hurt all at once. My father's absence weighed heavier than her betrayal. He missed him, not the man he was near the end, tired and frail, but the logical version of him. The one who taught me to pause, study, doubt, re-verify. That voice had been louder in my head lately. As I stood near the water, I finally typed 2 words in a blank document: parallel life. The phrase from the hedge plan now became my strategy. He wasn't here to revenge Mira. He was here to rebuild peace, with or without her in the frame. The day before I flew home, I left a note at the front desk for Mira. It simply said, "Not avoiding you. Used protecting peace. If you want to talk, do it with details, not emotion." He didn't sign it. He doubted she'd listen to the words, but writing them gave me relief. At dawn, I left the resort early, suitcases packed with more than tourist souvenirs. I carried screenshots, letters, copies of amended trust clauses, and a renewed sense of control. On the plane, I sat without headphones, watching the clouds roll below us. Sometimes silence is the most expensive currency between siblings. Back in my apartment, it felt like Ide never really left. The inbox hadn't slowed. Email correspondence from the estate attorney had already increased. Ide located a suspicious withdrawal from a joint account, one neither Mira nor Asold Bey had access to without legal clearance. That day, 3 weeks before the trust activation. Account owner, listed as our father, with Mira as authorized signer from a newly filed document added just months before he passed. For possibly. But right now, it wasn't about accusation. It was about evidence. He didn't call her. I didn't send a passive-aggressive message. He drafted a reply to the firm asking if they could request a full audit and attach the copies of signatures for authentication review. Being the anger, I just wanted truth. Nothing extravagant. Just honest correction. If nothing came of it, either move on. If something did, either follow protocol, no threats, no escalation. Meanwhile, I kept going. I went back to work. Rejoined my running group. Made weekend plans with people who knew nothing about probate court updates. That was the key. A parallel life. When were this fight didn't they consume me? Revenge seemed pointless compared to the calm of knowing you're clean. True to prediction, the legal process was slow to move. But as the days passed, my tone matured past frustration. He had been warned during that initial phone call with the attorney, probate discovery and trust assessment takes time, especially where accounts are dated, handwritten amendments are involved, and witnesses have either moved away or changed stories. The envelope that left me offered a compass, not a conclusion. Still, it mattered more than any courtroom monologue I could be delivered. By February, a court date was set for a procedural hearing. No trial. No drama. Used the start of confirmation and document verification. Mira had responded to the status inquiry through her own counsel by then, and press had not been involved, which I prayed would stay that way. I didn't want damage, only accountability. What made the delay tolerable was the life I had begun operating parallel to the case. I journaled again. Cooked deliberately. Started boxing lessons, oddly enough, not to punch something, but to remind myself I was occupying a body with discipline, not chaos. He never brought up the slap to her again. He didn't need to. She knew. And her silence on it was more revealing than an apology ever could be. It was guilt. Not deep, not dramatic, but functional guilt, the kind people carry when they know they acted too early out of fear instead of resolve. Meanwhile, I kept updating my digital log, a living document, complete with receipts, bank email forwards, lawyer notes, and legal appointments. It was long, but clean. He called it integrity report. He never showed it to anyone but my lawyer. They said, if this ever goes to deposition, you're already ahead. He nodded. Unlike Mira, I didn't want to win by trick. He just wanted the original rules back in place, transparency, fairness, and peace. Early spring brought confirmation that changed the trajectory of everything. The trust auditor officially confirmed 2 additional withdrawals prior to legal activation, one routed through an investment clearing account listed under our father's name but renamed after March. Paper tracked, stamped, and digitally approved 1 week before death. The signature? Not matching his verified documents on file. The handwriting wasn't the same, close, but too neat. Like capit. My stomach dropped, not from anger, but from the weight of truth. This wasn't paranoia. This wasn't sibling rivalry exaggerated by grief. This was deception. Legally verified. He was advised to remain quiet while the file moved to internal counsel for recommendation. The lawyer requested no communication with Mira. E.O. Bath. No dramatic messages. No moral lectures. Used witnessed silence. And it worked. Because 3 days later, her lawyer reached out. Not to deny, but to seek a private resolution. The phrase meant everything. There would be no fight, no courtroom drama. Used settlement talks. He didn't reply immediately. He gave it thought. Mira's proposal was mild, acknowledgement, adjustment of percentage share, and a quiet signature withdrawing all future executor privileges. Somehow, it felt like justice, not vengeance. He agreed. And required one final line be added, she must sign an affidavit admitting full transparency failure, non-malicious, but real. She signed. He never saw her in person. She didn't say thank you. Not I was wrong. But the paper trail said it for her. The slap, ironically, had become less about the hit than what it opened. It revealed everything. And I never threw one back. That, I realized, was the real inheritance Dad left me, the ability to stay still when the world spins. Everyone thinks strategy is motion. But sometimes, it's pause. Sometimes stillness is the loudest clarity. Weeks after the case closed, I received a final letter, not from lawyers, not from Mira, but from an accountant working with the auditing firm. It simply read, your attention to detail preserved the complete distribution. Without your diligence, things may have been shifted beyond correction. He clipped the note to my integrity report and decided not to read it again. An oath had been proven. An oath had been won. He didn't go on social media to frame the story. I didn't discuss it at dinner parties. In fact, only 3 people in my life know the full details. And that's how I wanted it. Credibility to the public never mattered, just private conviction. I hadn't lost myself during all of it. Meera never tried to contact me after the settlement. She had no reason to. We were separated not just by paperwork, but by worldview. To her, family was position. To me, it was principle. And once that divide showed itself in bright enough light, I didn't need to pretend anymore. I forgave her quietly. Not because she deserved it, but because I didn't deserve to carry anger for the rest of my life. One morning, I walked past a travel agency and saw a poster for Hawaii. A feeling. No nostalgia. Used relief. That island would never represent paradise for me, it would represent pivot. A turning point where I stopped letting other people shape my reactions. There is power in not matching Simeone's bad energy. That slap at the airport would always be remembered, yes. But not because it hurt. Because it launched a series of decisions where I finally started acting like someone I respected. That's my memory. Not hers. And I'm not changing it. Closure rarely arrives in cinematic moments. There wasn't a final text from Meera. No letter of apology slid under my door. No voicemail recorded at 2 de la mañana, there was only silence, and peace. I went on with life. I updated my will. I organized my files. I created an estate roadmap labeled in case of misunderstanding and left copies with a lawyer, a cousin, and my best friend. I refused to let the same confusion happen again, from my side. I traveled again, not to Hawaii, but somewhere colder, quieter. A place without memories attached. I walked along a quiet harbor, journaled about nothing in particular, and kept that last letter in the pocket of my coat. Not for drama, just for grounding. Every now and then, a friend would ask if Meera and I reconciled or worked through it. He would smile and say, we came to an understanding. That was true. She understood I wouldn't stay silent. He understood she wouldn't change. That was enough. What happened at the airport could be ruined me, socially, emotionally, even legally if I had reacted wrong. But I didn't. Because anger is temporary, but record-keeping is powerful. Because dignity never ages poorly. Because sometimes, walking away isn't a weakness, it's proof of self-control. That trip wasn't a reunion, it was a test. And I passed. I still see her name sometimes, tagged in family group threads I no longer respond to. And I'm okay with that. Because I learned how to protect truth without performing rage. I learned how to stand up without losing peace. And most importantly, I learned the one hedge that beats all manipulation, detachment without bitterness. No revenge, no obsession, no war. Just clarity, documentation, and the calm that comes from choosing self-respect over spectacle. That was the real ending. And I wouldn't rewrite a single word. Sometimes, the real victory is not letting yourself lose, even if the other person wins with a lie. If you've ever felt something like this, please let me know in the comments. I read every comment. If this story touched your heart, please give it a like. Don't forget to share it with someone close to you, they might need to hear it too. And if you want to hear more such real stories, subscribe to the channel. See you in the next story.